The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population.
The import of yesterday's announcement that the ICC is to pursue arrest warrants against Israel's Prime Minister and Defence Minister is starting to sink in.
My office charges Netanyahu and Gallant as co-perpetrators and as superiors in the commission of these alleged crimes.
A trio of Hamas leaders were also named, but they're already isolated and sanctioned in the West, so don't stand to lose as much. Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, though, do.
It's a rogue prosecutor who's out to demonize the one and only Jewish state. And he's doing that by first applying a false symmetry. He's equating Israel's democratically elected leaders with the terrorist tyrants of Hamas. That's like saying, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for, after 9/11, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for Osama bin Laden.
That is not how the law works. The law says, let me look at the set of behavior and assess it against what the law says and make the determination based on those facts. It's not making a judgment of whether one perpetrator is more or less sort of blameworthy than another.
So what happens next? A panel of ICC judges decides whether there's reasonable grounds for an arrest. In the case of Vladimir Putin last year, it took just a month for his arrest warrant to be issued for the unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children. For Sudan's Omar al-Bashir, the warrant came through in 9 months, accused of genocide. ICC judges are talking about Netanyahu in the same breath as these leaders, and that is extremely damaging internationally. By the end of this year, in fact, he could become the first democratically elected leader to have an ICC arrest warrant on his head. And if it gets to that stage, here's what it means.
If any of those suspects travel to one of the 124 countries that have joined the court, those countries are under a legal obligation to execute those arrest warrants. So that is a significant part of the world that those people will not want to be traveling to.
The US, Israel's main ally, is not an ICC member, so Netanyahu would be free to travel there if an arrest warrant was issued. Joe Biden yesterday.
Let me be clear. We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders.
The UK, though, another ally, is a member of the court. The Prime Minister's reaction to the ICC's request today.
This development by the ICC does absolutely nothing to help get a pause in the fighting, to get the hostages out or aid in.
Other countries like France have backed the ruling in the ICC's independence. The prosecutor's decision to pursue this is putting Israel's allies in a bind and could ultimately turn out to be a make-or-break moment for the International Criminal Court itself.
Horik O'Brien reporting. Well, joining me now from Tel Aviv is Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Withholding food, withholding medicines, the collective punishment of the people of Gaza. They're serious charges, aren't they?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show, Jackie. Well, I think the ICC has managed to do something quite rare. I think they've managed to offend, I think, the 9 or 10 million people living here in Israel. Look, those charges are completely unfounded. Never mind about the propaganda. Let's just look at the facts on that when it comes to aid going into Gaza. There have been more than 500,000 tons of aid in the last 24 hours. Just today, more than 400 trucks went in. That is 4 football stadiums of aid, food,
The United
shelter.
Nations says the north of Gaza is at risk of famine. Even some of your strongest allies, the US and the UK, have been airdropping food. They've built a temporary pier, creating a new maritime channel, and they're not doing that because they think the people of Gaza have enough food, are they?
Well, the truth is, and these are the facts, again, not the propaganda.
Well, they're all facts.
So, Jackie, if you just let me answer, there's no point inviting me on if you don't let me answer. The aid is going in. What is happening once it goes into Gaza? Unfortunately, it's being hijacked by Hamas. I can guarantee you one thing, that there's no one hungry in Hamas, that's for sure. When we've arrested them, we found no problems with their waistline whatsoever. But ordinary Gazans, I think that if you look at the pictures of markets in Gaza, they are bustling. But where there is hunger, it is hunger orchestrated by Hamas. Hamas are purposefully trying to damage their own people.
Hamas will have to answer for the charges laid against them by the same prosecutor. What about Israel? Israel will have to answer these charges, won't it?
So, Jackie, this is the equivalent of the British forces on the end, just going into Berlin at the end of the Second World War, and a criminal court saying to Churchill, you know, we're going to put its arrest warrant out for Adolf Hitler, and we'll do one for you as well, Churchill. There is no comparison whatsoever between the democratically elected government of the State of Israel and the genocidal murderous.
But the argument about false equivalence, sorry to interrupt you, but the argument about false equivalence is just a distraction. As I say, there are charges laid against 3 of Hamas's main leaders. They will have to answer those charges for themselves. The thing is, they're already considered a terrorist organisation in many parts of the world. This is much more damaging for the reputation of your Prime Minister, for your country, isn't it?
So it is slightly ridiculous because you can find our Prime Minister sitting in the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. You'll be able to find the subterranean leaders of Hamas in terror dungeons deep underground in Rafah, probably surrounded by Israel's hostages to keep them safe. So, you know, it's an outrageous slur against these people. We, of course, here in Israel and Jewish people in general are used to these sorts of vicious slurs. Once again, there is no shortage of aid going into Gaza, but it's Hamas itself which is stealing the aid.
But
and
the
it's
truth
Hamas
is
that is responsible.
That may well be Israel's defence against these charges. But there are more than 120 countries that are signatories to the ICC. If arrest warrants are issued, all of those countries, should Prime Minister Netanyahu try to visit, they would be expected to arrest him, wouldn't they?
So there's a crucial point which you're missing there, of course, because Israel isn't a signatory of this deal. And of course, they've assumed that the state of Palestine is a signatory. But of course, the state of Palestine doesn't exist yet. And the best place for a state of Palestine to be created would be...
The UK, for example, is a signatory to the ICC. What would you expect Rishi Sunak to do if there is an arrest warrant issued for your Prime Minister, if he should try and come here? The UK would be expected under law to arrest him.
So the UK, together with the US and Germany and Italy, I think the enlightened countries in Europe have made clear that they recognise this is just an opportunist pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel move, because just look at the results. The only people benefiting from this case will be the Hamas murderers themselves. They've got no incentive whatsoever now to release our hostages, one of our war aims, because they simply say to themselves, hey, why should we release hostages when the ICC is going after the Prime Minister of Israel? Job done. It does nothing to bring people together. It does nothing for peace. It just pours petrol on the
very
flames
briefly, if you would, if countries like the UK were to reject the rulings of the ICC on this case, it would also have ramifications for the situation regarding Vladimir Putin, wouldn't it? He has an arrest warrant already out for him for the invasion of Ukraine. They can't pick and choose, can they?
I'm not sure I get your question, but what our Prime Minister said today was that he was asking enlightened countries to ignore this blatantly political attempt at trying to malign this country, especially when we're doing more than anyone in this conflict to try and get food to Gazans. Because the water that's going into Gaza is because Israel has provided the water lines and repaired the ones which Hamas destroyed. The food that's going into Gaza is going in there because Israel's getting it in. It's Hamas, which is putting it towards their own nefarious means.
David Mencer, thank you very much for talking to us this evening. Thank you.